Hello and welcome to Crossview Radio, a weekly podcast for Wayne County. I'm John Marino, pastor of Crossview Church in Orville. We exist to glorify God by exalting Christ and magnifying the gospel for the joy of all nations. We are here this week at T4G in Louisville, Kentucky. You can probably hear in the background we are in a hotel right now and talking with a couple guys about church planting. Many of you guys probably know that we have been church planting here in Orville for the last 3 years. And our sending church, Palmetto Baptist Church, is in Greenville, South Carolina, Powdersville, actually, South Carolina. And we got Pastor Jason Ormiston from there with us. And also, Palmetto planted Centerpoint Baptist Church as well. And so Pastor Heston Blake is here with us from there. Also, welcome, guys.
Well, it's good to be here.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, can you guys share as we kind of get started a little bit about maybe your heart for church planting, what you're doing right now in your ministry, and kind of what gives you a heart and passion for church planting? Pastor Jason, you want to start us off?
Yeah. So I would say the call to fulfill the Great Commission, to be a part of it, the joy of making disciples of the nations, it's manifested at a church level through planting churches. So individually, we're hopefully leading people to Jesus and teaching them how to lead others to Jesus. And if our churches are doing the same thing, we're planting churches. And so that's the great motivation for me. And also knowing that Christ says, I'm going to build the church, and the gates of hell don't prevail. So,
yeah, we were encouraged our time at Palmetto by that heart for church planting that I think that you've emphasized, and really, I think in a lot of ways has driven us even where we're at. Heston, what about you? Tell us a little bit about the church plant there.
Yeah, when we started church planting was not for me. I thought that was just crazy people that go out to the western side of the United States. And we planted about 3 hours from Palmetto with the intention of it being almost a sister church where we could have some help in the background. Jason was personally instrumental in a lot of that, going, you should consider it. I went through a phase of like, no, I don't need to do that. I was planning to climb the religious corporate ladder of youth pastor to senior pastor and calling it a day, but the church plant, really, God just kind of changed our heart, and we really, really love church planting. Got a great family of some people up in Huntersville, North Carolina, and I wouldn't change it for the world.
How long have you guys been there?
We will be entering into our 7th year in December,
Okay.
So about 6-7 years now.
Cool. Great. So why church planting? Why even bother with the whole issue of church planting?
I know for us, we target an area that I asked a lot of the surrounding pastors in Charlotte, and we're in the Bible Belt. So to tell people why another church in the Bible Belt, I actually tracked down a lot of our pastors in the area and said, is there a needy area? I didn't want to just be another flock for sheep to jump to. We really want to be a gospel presence. And getting the boots on the ground message was go to Huntersville. Our city's gone from 10,000 to, I think we're at 65,000 people in the last 10 to 15 years. So there really wasn't a gospel presence, period, a local church. So that's why we chose Huntersville. So finding that location where the gospel needs to go forward was our plan.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of unbelievers that call themselves believers, and they do that because they go to church or occasionally show up to church. And I think there's a great need for churches to be planted.
Yeah. And the other thing that you guys have started doing at Palmetto that I think we should start rethinking a little bit more is you guys are doing revitalization now, which I think maybe is a little bit more on the rise. People are thinking about that, but just tell a little bit, how many churches, is it 2 churches that you guys are investing in right now?
Yeah, so we actually are currently working with 3, and one of them we realized that as we were talking with the pastor and working and sending some members, that it wasn't the best fit for our particular church, and so I was able to connect them with a couple other churches, and so that's been a success in the midst of it not working out the way I intended, and that's what happens a lot of times with these ideas. You try something and it kind of looks like it's failing, but God's at work. But the idea is this: we have a lot of small churches, particularly in urban areas, that have buildings and not many people. They do have some resources. And instead of having all these churches close their doors, what if we could send help with training and revitalize them to reclaim cities? Yeah. That's the thought.
Yeah, that's so Heston and we've been kind of church planning essentially from scratch. Did you have a team with you? I know we had a kind of a small team.
There was 4 of us.
4 of you?
My wife and I and one other couple.
Okay,
So.
okay.
That's a team.
That's a team. So it counts.
Paul and
Counts.
Barnabas,
That's all we
right?
need.
Paul, Silas. Paul, Timothy. I'm going to keep going. It's always Paul, though.
So the revitalization, one of the things that, is a challenge, I think, in church planning is you don't have all the resources in terms of just maybe a building or the materials and things like that. So do you see that as being helpful in terms of revitalization, all that foundational work, and in the logistics, I guess?
It could also be one of the biggest burdens because the building's falling apart.
Yeah.
It does take a different kind of guy to be good at revitalizing a church.
Yeah.
A church planter is more of an entrepreneurial, really go get them, meet people. A church revitalizing guy is got to shepherd the flock that's there and help bridge gaps in the community. So, they're similar, but they are distinct.
Yeah. What are there any other unique challenges or things that sets revitalization apart from church planning that has been maybe stumbling blocks for you guys, or barriers, or things you guys had to work past?
Well, I mean, to me, it's the barrier of what I see in the modern church movement of a one large church branding itself throughout the community and coming up with multi-campus sites. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. It seems to me to miss a shepherding component that the New Testament refers to.
Sure.
And I would like to see us go and help churches that had a vision reclaim that vision and then actually partner together to reclaim cities. So I think there's a lot of strength in it. But we still need church planters. We need you guys doing what you're doing.
Yeah. What
to
about
reach people?
Yeah. What about for you, Heston? Any unique challenges in the church planning context that you faced? Or
I think for me it's growing to remember and remind ourselves continually that Christ is going to build this church. I know your context being in a YMCA for now. For us, we were basically handed a building. We were living the church planter's dream right now, having a good facility for $500 a month, which is kind of crazy, but God's going to provide for different things in different ways. I mean, to provide for you guys at the Ys, it sounds really cool.
Yeah.
So just thinking through those things.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's helpful, kind of going back again to this idea of team. We didn't go up with a team, but we met a group of people that had been meeting, about 15 people, and I can't imagine just the challenge of completely doing it from scratch. But that team model has been immensely helpful for us because right from the beginning we had people who were able to preach if I needed to leave or to lead music, and that was just a huge benefit of that. So let me ask, where should we be doing this? Where are we doing this? I know Palmetto is gearing up to possibly do a church plant in Seattle as well.
Right.
Any input on that in terms of
why
choosing?
The reason for out west, there's a great need out west for sure, but it's more that God's moving in the heart of one of our volunteer pastors to head out in that direction. So it's not so much that we're strategically looking at the west or Midwest or any. My own personal heartbeat is towards urban.
Yeah.
I'd love to see urban churches revitalized and planted. But in the case of Bill Eisman, as he's going out to Seattle, as the Lord's leading him, that's just God places a burden on his heart. We want to help partner with people and help them.
Yeah. And then the other 3 are in the Greenville area.
Yes,
is that
they
right?
are.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Do you guys have your eyes on any other church revitalizations right now, or?
Yeah. So right now, I think it's more of getting even further organized as to how to really help these churches, because we've just jumped in. A lot of times with, I'd say, church planning, it's so much fun. You just got to jump in.
Yeah.
It's not as difficult as a lot of people make it sound. It's helpful to get education on it and all, read books, but ultimately, if God's leading, He guides, He provides. You jump in, you try to have a core group, and you get started, and then you learn and you ask lots of questions. Wouldn't you say? I mean,
there's so many different challenges I would think to revitalization with church planning. You get to start the framework from ground zero. That's everything from a translation to philosophy and people inherently get to know that. Now, I think the flip side of that is, in the early days, you often have a lot of people trying to make their own agenda your church plan. And I think we're committed to doing it God's way. you have to work through some of those challenges. So there's challenges on both sides.
Yeah.
And if I can say one other thing on that, if you use the analogy that I did with the churches are like people reach people for Jesus and reproduce themselves. Yes. Churches should do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Church revitalization only works if the church is at that Galatians 6:1 where they're overtaken. You can't help a church that's dying by me telling them, your church is dying. I don't see many people there. That's an arrogant approach on my part. I need to wait for the church to get to a point where they're like, we're overtaken in what's going on. Please help us. And then a lot of that tradition or whatever, we used to do it this way, they say we used to do it this way, but obviously it's not working.
So did they come to you then?
All of them have
they
at
all
this
come
point.
to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm hoping that that'll continue, but also that we'll be able to have word of mouth that we're doing this, and then churches will hear about it and say something.
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the things that's been helpful to us in our ministry is, you mentioned a minute ago, Heston, just there, being in a church plant, there was an inherent level of flexibility that was there. So there wasn't necessarily this idea of this tradition of this is the way we've always done it. And even now when we have to make different kinds of changes, logistically and otherwise, I think there's a lot more flexibility than maybe in an established church where you're trying to change direction. That can be challenging sometimes. Is that, Pastor Jason, when you guys are ministering in this context, is that something that comes up in terms of just trying to break past some of maybe the tradition that's built up, or
as far as revitalizing?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I mean, we're in the same boat with you guys as far as we're setting up chairs every Saturday. We don't have our own building, so we're coming up on 8 years. So the fact that you were sent out in 7.
Appreciate that. Yeah. That's great.
Well,
we have a building. You can use that sometime if you need it.
So we have our own challenges, but I've said to both of you that the driving force, the principles of God's Word, the people God brings you, then the programs to meet the needs, the property will fall in line.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping and trusting that that's going to happen for us. Yeah. But those things can be difficult because you want to have that secure base because there's so many things you want to do.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, yeah, no, I'd like to talk about that for a minute, because maybe just talk here a little bit about some of the how-to of church planning, and obviously every context is different, but for us, in our current context at the YMCA, I was sharing with you guys the other day that it's actually been a positive thing to be at the YMCA. We have to set up every week, tear down. It doesn't take that long, but at least in terms of just the size that we are as a church plant right now, and the amount of people we have in terms of resources, it's freed us up to, we don't have to maintain a building right now. And so all of that time translates for us into ministry. So we can do more of the discipleship, more of the people work, more of the one-on-one small groups, Bible studies, because we don't have to to maintain a building. And honestly, until we're at a point where we're outgrowing that space, I don't see a building as essential for us. I'm hearing of some church plants that are permanently renting. I think there's good and bad to that, but I think as long as we can, we'll do something like that. Heston, a little bit of how you guys kind of approached it, the how-to.
Yeah, we're renting our building. It's a church building, probably seats about 140 people. We have a relationship. We pay $500 a month, as I mentioned, and really they cut the grass. They do all the maintenance. Anything over $1,000, they pay for.
Wow.
So I think there's challenges on both sides. I think the building component is a blessing in the sense of it provides a stability to the community, that this church is not just here while this guy's here. We intentionally moved to our zip code. Our house is in our zip code where the church is. Yeah. So there's a lot of pieces just in the humanistic element to say this group wants to be here for the long range of our community. I think the flip side, like you said, the transientness of being in the YMCA, you're with people all the time. You have a natural in and out basis for people. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I think the challenge, though, with what you're describing as the modern take on renting a building and not putting money into a permanent facility, that works as long as that philosophy of ministry is alive in your church or you're there leading it.
Sure.
But it doesn't speak well for the longevity of that ministry. You do need to have an official landing place. And then you need to ask the question, how big, what kind of a place is it going to be? But I do think it's a good thing for us to get a permanent location that we can call our home and then send people from that.
Sure.
There's a balance in it.
So we've tried to, we've actually approached a ministry in our community about possible merge, and that didn't pan out. But that's also a possibility to find another church that needs to be revitalized, and is possibly on the edge of dying, and possibly consider doing something like that.
We've tried that as well. It hasn't been successful yet, but we have tried that.
Was that after? When was that?
Oh, I mean, it's like going on right now.
Oh, okay.
I mean, we're constantly turning over every stone to look for potentials, and none of these are like perfect solutions.
Yeah.
In fact, they all have problems connected to them. But we're just investigating and praying and hoping and seeking what God would do for us next.
Sure. We're talking a lot about logistics. How do we do this? Why do we do this? Where do we do this? I know we talked a little bit about this last night, last night over dinner. But talk a little bit about just the guarding our hearts aspect, the discipling people. I think sometimes when we talk about church planting, we kind of get excited and we, I'll do this and I'll do that, and building and, logistics and finances and dot, dot, dot. Do you ever find that the people sometimes get lost in all that?
Yeah, I think there's so many different elements when you talk about the spiritual side of this. I mean, it's life, it's people's lives, it's your life. Jason and I were talking today on the elevator, ironically, to say that I think for me, guarding the heart has changed as God grows and changes you, and I think to remember that this is His church.
Yeah.
I will build my church. There becomes a less of a defensiveness to your own personal ministry. I think as a church planter, you feel like you take ownership. This is the church I'm planting. I am doing this, when in reality it's His church. He's going to build it. He's going to bring the right people. He's going to bring the right facilities. He's going to bring all this together. But it's just stepping back and say, Lord, I've got to learn to trust you, that you know what's best.
Yeah.
And that kind of guarded my heart when I think initially this was can be very possessive of your own church.
Yeah, I think in any category of life, I can find my identity in my job. I can find my identity in ministry instead of finding my identity in Christ.
Sure.
Yeah.
And resting there instead of that.
I think having a group of men that work alongside of you, and as much as both of you can continue to push in that direction towards identifying men in the church that have the gift of pastor-teacher, and figure out a way to facilitate a path for them to become lay pastors, volunteer pastors. That would be a feeding ground for the paid staff as an idea. That's been so helpful for me, because the encouragement that you have in community is so much better than isolation. That's just loving God, loving your neighbor, and it's helpful in that way.
Sure. Good. Yeah. Good. What else? You guys have any other input, thoughts? Maybe someone's listening who wants to go church planning. Any advice as they start off?
I think for me it would be just don't overthink it. If God's called you to it, you have a burden, jump in and enjoy the moments. I would encourage you, John, enjoy those days, the small days. You don't get those back. There's something fun about setting up chairs and seeing God provide something new to your church, whether it's a piano or a songbook or a projector, whatever you're using. There's great joy in just seeing God provide, and don't forget those. I think we forget them quickly.
Sure.
That He's providing, He's meeting your needs.
Yeah, I think one of the things that has been encouragement for us, I know, is sometimes we try to, my tendency at least, I try to figure everything out to the last detail. And when we came up here, really I just put my 2-week notice into my job and moved up really without knowing what was going to happen. And God just I was telling you guys the other night, there was one place that we asked if they would support us financially, and they said no. All the other places, we didn't seek them out. They actually sought us out, including, Palmetto. You guys, in fact, still support us financially. But I just think that element, too, of, that just faith and that rest in God of even being willing to do things not irrational, but a sense of risk of I'm just going to trust God, and I'm just going to go out and rest in Him and let Him provide. So
yeah. The last thing I'd add to that is like unashamedly encourage people that are thinking about church planting to consider getting training. I'm teaching a new course at Bob Jones Seminary on church planting and revitalization, and it's a hybrid course which is mainly online, except for 1 week each semester we're going to meet up in a different city, and we're going to at that city spend the whole week in the mornings talking about it, in the afternoons going out and doing it, meeting with pastors, and I think that would be a great tool for people to consider to say, how do I do this? And then do it and build friendships that would last a lifetime.
So if someone's interested in that, where can they go to?
Where can I go? Where can I go to check that out?
Yeah. You mean you could email me at jormisto@bju.edu. That would be the easiest one.
All right.
Yeah, or just Google Jason Ormiston, Bob Jones, and you'll
You guys
you'll
gonna
find
come
me.
to Orville for part of that, or?
It's an urban emphasis, so probably not. But we will love on you, that's for sure. Yeah, I'm thinking more. We've got earmarked Detroit, Minneapolis, Los Angeles, New York City, those types of places.
The country needs the gospel too.
I agree, and I'm glad you guys are giving it. Keep bringing it.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. Glad to have you here today.
Thanks, John.
Thanks.
So,
It was fun.
thanks for listening to Crossview Radio. I'm John Marino, pastor of Crossview Church in Orville. We meet Sundays at 10 a.m. at the Orville YMCA. To find out more about Crossview Church, visit us online at crossvieworville.com.